everyone, Kate Hilliard, registered dietitian here at the Antonio E. Garcia Center. Today's topic is going to be about nutrition facts label reading. Now, some of you may already be reading labels at home, which is awesome. I always encourage it. But for some of you that maybe struggle with exactly what to look for on a label, what does that information tell me, today we're really going to break it down to make it super simple. I brought some of my food from my pantry to show you exactly what we look for when we're looking on a label. Now, last week we talked about carbohydrates, and so most of our prepackaged items that I have here are carbohydrate items, because that's definitely what will raise blood sugar. So we always want to make sure that we're keeping that in check. So things like cereals, crackers, whole grains, pastas, pretzels, pasta sauces, beans, and even corn, and some of our canned items will definitely contain carbohydrates. So that's something that we'll be looking at. So something that is very important when you get into label reading is making sure you have the right tools. So having portion cups and spoons will make sure that you measure the serving sizes the way it's listed on the label. So usually your kits will have 1/4 of a cup, 1/3, 1/2 a cup, and a full cup. You'll also have things like teaspoons and tablespoons, and no worries, if you don't have it, you can also use regular kitchen sizes such as a tablespoon, or a smaller spoon would be a teaspoon size. When it comes to food labels, serving sizes are going to be measured very differently. So something like cereal is usually going to be about a cup serving. Things like our oatmeal or like our whole grains are also going to be in cup serving size format. But then when we get into things like crackers or pretzels, the serving sizes are going to be more like counts, or what they call pieces. So for something like our wheat thins here, 16 pieces is considered a serving size, and in our pretzels, about 20 pretzels is considered a serving size. You may also see serving sizes on frozen meals as listed as 1 meal or 1/2 a meal. Sometimes 1/2 a container, 1 full container. So again, to always look at how they're measuring a serving size so you can be almost sure that you're getting the nutrients that you need. Now we're going to be looking at the ingredients in our items that we have. And the biggest thing with pasta sauce is many times it actually has quite a bit of sugar. So making sure that we're counting it as a carbohydrate if you are consuming it with things like your pasta. So here on the label, 13 grams of total carbohydrate for just 1/2 a cup of sauce. So that is pretty significant, as it does add 1 carbohydrate serving. Now, when we're looking at ingredients to find out where does that sugar actually come from, when you look at an ingredient label, the way that it's listed is the more that the product contains a certain ingredient, the higher it will be up on the list. So the first ingredient here is tomato puree, which makes sense. It's a pasta sauce, tomato sauce, so it should have tomatoes as its first ingredient, and it does. It also includes diced tomatoes. The third ingredient, however, is sugar. And so knowing that sugar is higher up on the list will tell you that it definitely has a lot more added sugar than maybe we intended. As we continue reading, we'll see that it has things like canola oil, dehydrated onions, some salt, also some other flavorings and extracts. So this can be really helpful when you're reading the ingredient list to watch for things like added salt and added sugar. And they may be in different names as well. But most of the time you'll see it as salt, sugar, high fructose corn syrup. Also when it comes to salt, sometimes sodium or disodium. So always be making sure that you're also reading the ingredients that are listed out on your label. So now we're going to get close up into a label that I have here, cereal. Now cereals usually list out almost all your vitamins and minerals, and you may not see that on all labels, but cereals definitely do have it. Now, all nutrition facts, they're always going to have amount per container. So in this cereal, we have 12 servings per container here, and it'll always let you know what the serving size is. So a serving size for our cereal is considered 1 cup. So there's about 12 cups, since there's about 12 servings per container in this whole box of cereal. And why that's important to know the serving size is because everything else on this label will pertain to that 1 cup. Usually you'll see next to that serving size, in parentheses, a gram count. So this one says 42 grams. Now when we talk about carbohydrates and diabetes, we talk a lot about grams. However, this has nothing to do with carbohydrates, but has everything to do about the weight. So if you had a food scale, you could be even more precise than the 1 cup and actually weigh on your scale 42 grams of this cereal. But for most of us at home, we'll actually be portioning it out with the 1 cup. So that 1 cup serving is going to have 170 calories, which is bolded here. It's going to have 3 grams of fat, no cholesterol, 180 milligrams of sodium, 34 grams of carbohydrate, 3 grams of protein. So you'll notice that those nutrients I just pointed out are all bolded. And underneath, it gives you a breakdown of exactly what type of fats make up total fat and what type of carbohydrates make up total carbohydrates. So looking at our total fat is 3 grams. So that fat can come from 4 different fat varieties. So there's saturated fat, which isn't so great to have in your diet, but it is there. Trans fat, which we don't want to consume at all. Polyunsaturated fat, which is a heart-healthy fat, but even more so, monounsaturated. That's our most heart-healthy fat we can consume. So this cereal actually contains polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fat. So we are getting some good fats when we eat this cereal, and not very much at 3 grams. The other thing to look at with cholesterol, if something is an animal or animal product, it will contain cholesterol. But obviously this being cereal does not contain any animal products such as milk, butter, or eggs, so there's no cholesterol in here. Now adding milk to the cereal will give us a little bit of cholesterol. Sodium, 180 milligrams of sodium. Now, it's kind of hard to look at how many milligrams of sodium there is and to think about, is this high or low in sodium? And so one trick that I always teach people reading labels, especially on the sodium line, is to scan your eyes over to that percent daily value. So you'll see a number, a percentage, in the column under percent daily value. And here we have 8%. Now, a good rule of thumb is when something is 5% or lower, it's considered low in that nutrient. When it's 20% or higher, it's considered high in that nutrient. And so looking at sodium again, at 8%, it's not really 20%, it's a little closer to 5. So we would consider 180 milligrams at 8% lower in sodium. So this is a pretty good item that doesn't have much sodium in it. Now, going now to total carbohydrates, 34 grams. So one serving size of carbohydrate is 15 grams. So consuming this cereal with 1 cup would give us about 2 carbohydrate servings. Now with total carbohydrates, you definitely want to look at the grams, not so much the daily percent value, in order to know how much carbohydrate you're getting. Now, there are a few carbohydrate sources that you can consume, and they're actually included underneath total carbohydrate line. So that can be dietary fiber, total sugars, and then also included added sugars. So dietary fiber is definitely what we want to consume in our diet as we consume whole grains and things that will not spike our blood sugar, like refined carbohydrates do. So here we have 2 grams of dietary fiber, which is pretty good, and we can even look over at the daily percent value at 9%, and it's not a great source of fiber, but we are getting a little something from it. Underneath that is total sugars at 9 grams. When I talk about cereals, the goal is to have 9 grams or less of sugar is kind of a good guideline for picking out a cereal. And underneath total sugars, this is a brand new line that was just added this year in 2020. You'll notice it'll say included 8 grams of added sugar. So anything like your white sugars or any of high fructose corn syrups, anything that's added that isn't considered honey or fruit or a natural source has to be included on a label now, which is a great source of information. Now the other thing that's not on here under total carbohydrates and that you usually don't see on a label is what's called other carbohydrates. So carbohydrates, there's many food sources from it, and so we have quite a bit of other carbohydrate that's not listed out on here, but following that total carbohydrate is very important, even more so than the total sugars, because it's not just sugar that raises blood sugar, it's total carbohydrate. Now the last thing to look at is our protein. So here we're getting about 3 grams of protein, which is pretty good for a cereal. And then once we add the milk as well, we'll also have a little bit more protein there. Now, most of your protein sources will be things like your meat, your eggs, your fish, and typically about 1 ounce will give you 7 to 9 grams of protein. So when we're looking at a product like a cereal, we know it's more so a total carbohydrate food, and that's where we really want to focus more of our attention. Looking below the line here, you're going to see everything listed with vitamin D, calcium, iron, potassium, all the way down to zinc. Now, we can use that daily percent value again to also look to see if anything listed here is 20% or higher. And most of our vitamins, it's great to say, are listed well over 20%, especially things like folate at 100%, B12, riboflavin, thiamine, and even B6. Now the important thing about cereals to note is that they do spray on a lot of their vitamins and minerals, so you need to be drinking the bottom of the bowl when it comes to your cereals to make sure you're getting all these vitamins and minerals in there. Now, most labels won't list out all of these, but they will list out 4 important ones. And you can, again, use that information, the percent daily value, to make sure that you are getting a food that is nutrient rich. So as I told you when we were looking at our cereal label, there's always going to be 4 nutrients that have to be listed out. And that's always going to be vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium. So these are 4 nutrients that the government has seen to be deficient or low in the American diet. So vitamin D is, we know, main sources from sunlight, but we can also get some from food as well. And that is going to help strengthen our bones, help our immune system. Also calcium, which we know is great for bones, for teeth, also for our muscles. Iron, as we talk about anemias and making sure that we have healthy blood, healthy metabolism. And then even potassium. So potassium can help naturally lower blood pressure. So it works kind of an opposite with sodium there. So these are 4 nutrients that have been seen a little lower in American diets and why they're now having to be required on our labels here. And remember, you can use the same rule on the percentages of percent daily value, looking for ones that are at least 20% or higher, and if they're 5% or lower, to realize that it's probably not the best source of it. So here on our oats, our iron is about 10%, so it's a good source of iron. And our vitamin D, calcium, potassium, we can get from other sources. But knowing exactly what's on our label is going to help us make better choices. So another important thing when looking at the ingredient list is to see if you're getting a whole food or not. So a whole food will it will be 1 ingredient and list out that whole food. So my quinoa ingredient is just organic white quinoa. Same thing with our oats. The only ingredient in here is whole grain rolled oats. Same thing when we look at our black beans or our corn. Now, the more ingredients that are listed out, the more processed that food becomes. So to be watching out and counting exactly how many ingredients in there can make you think twice before actually consuming it. Now, the first ingredient, or the first food item, I should say, that ever hit 100 ingredients was the Hot Pocket. So very obviously a processed food in something like frozen or those kind of prepared things. So being careful to always watch what those labels are saying and how many ingredients that something has in it. Now typically, to keep it 5 or less ingredients keeps it closer to a whole food. But when you're looking at a label and you're seeing that one food is all that's listed on the label, you know that you are getting a whole food and a healthier choice. So just to give a summary of everything we looked at today, because it was a lot of information, first thing is to look in your kitchen cabinets and drawers to see if you have things like portion cups, portion spoons to help you measure out your food. And it's not something that you have to do forever, but at the beginning while you're learning, it is very important to know what a portion size is. The other thing is when you're looking at labels, the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. So even taking time when you're grocery shopping before buying a new product to look at that label. Believe me, it's not weird. You want to be an informed consumer when you're choosing in the grocery aisle. The other thing is to look at the ingredients and to make sure there's no things like hidden sugar or hidden salt in there. And the more ingredients a product has, the more processed that it is as well. So being able to find products that are just the one sole ingredient will guarantee that you have a whole food. So don't be overwhelmed, just take it one step at a time and your blood sugar will thank you for it.